My name is Tom Grant, and I used to believe in happy endings. 40 years old, former firefighter turned building inspector. The kind of guy who checks foundations for a living but somehow missed the cracks in his own marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me, especially not at 3 in the morning when I found myself doing laundry that wasn't mine. Natalie had always been particular about her clothes. Designer labels, dry clean only, everything. The works. So when I pulled a second phone out of her gym bag while sorting whites from darks, my world shifted on its axis. Just a work phone, she'd said when I asked about it over breakfast. Natalie worked HR at TechFlow Solutions, one of those companies that sprouted up in our Rust Belt city like weeds after rain. Her boss, David Kessler, was the golden boy type. Expensive suits, expensive car, expensive everything. The kind of man who made 40-year-old building inspectors feel invisible. "Since when does HR need two phones?" I asked, stirring sugar into my coffee. "Since we started handling sensitive employee data," she replied, without looking up from her tablet. David insists on separation between personal and professional communications. David. Always David these days. I watched my wife of 16 years butter her toast with surgical precision, her auburn hair catching the morning light. She was beautiful, always had been. High school sweethearts, married young, built what I thought was a solid life together. Our daughter Zoe was 15 now, sharp as a tack and twice as stubborn as her mother. "Dad, can you drive me to school today?" Zoe appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Mom's leaving early again." "Another early meeting?" I asked Natalie. "Strategy session with David," she said, finally meeting my eyes. "Big client presentation next week." I nodded and smiled, playing the understanding husband. But something cold had settled in my chest. Something that had nothing to do with the morning air. After they left, I sat alone in our kitchen, staring at the coffee ring Natalie's mug had left on the table. 16 years of marriage. And suddenly I felt like a stranger in my own house. The walls I'd helped build, the foundation I'd personally inspected, none of it felt solid anymore. My phone buzzed. Pete Kowalski, my old partner from the fire department, now running a small private investigation business. "Coffee?" his text read. "Needed," I replied. An hour later, we sat in Murphy's Diner, the kind of place that served coffee strong enough to wake the deceased and didn't care about your problems as long as you tipped decent. "You look like hell," Pete said, sliding into the booth across from me. He was built like a brick wall with a mustache, the kind of guy who'd walk through fire for a friend. Literally, in our case. "Thanks for the pep talk." "What's eating you?" I told him about the phone, the early meetings, the way Natalie had started working out religiously after years of claiming she hated gyms, how she'd suddenly developed a taste for expensive wine and started wearing perfume to work. "Could be nothing," Pete said, but his cop instincts were showing. "Could be something. You want to know for sure?" "I want to know. Then we'll find out. But Tom?" He leaned forward, his expression serious. "Be ready for whatever we find. Sometimes the foundation's more cracked than we think." That evening, I watched Natalie get ready for another girls' night with Monica and Jess, her work friends. She spent an hour on her makeup, chose a dress that cost more than my monthly truck payment, and kissed my cheek with lips that tasted like lies. "Don't wait up," she said. Wouldn't dream of it. After she left, I found myself in our bedroom, looking at the life we'd built together. Wedding photos on the dresser, Zoe's school pictures on the nightstand. Everything perfectly arranged. But perfect arrangements could hide structural damage, and I was trained to spot the signs. I was emptying the hamper when I smelled it. Cologne that wasn't mine. Expensive, woody, familiar. The same cologne I'd given David Kessler last Christmas when Natalie insisted we get her boss a gift. "It's important to maintain good relationships," she'd said. Apparently, she'd taken that advice to heart. My hands shook as I held the shirt to the light. Lipstick on the collar. Faint but unmistakable. Not Natalie's shade. She wore reds, this was pink. But it was on her shirt, mixed with his cologne. And suddenly I understood why she'd been doing her own laundry lately. The next morning brought more evidence. A restaurant receipt tucked in her purse. Chez Laurent, the French place downtown she'd always claimed to hate. "Overpriced and pretentious," she'd said whenever I suggested it for anniversaries. But there it was. Dinner for two. Wine that cost more than our mortgage payment, dated 3 days ago when she'd supposedly been at a work conference in Cleveland. I sat in my truck outside TechFlow's gleaming office building, watching employees stream in for another day of corporate advancement. At exactly 8:47 a.m., David Kessler's silver Tesla pulled into the executive parking spot. At 8:52, Natalie's Honda pulled in 3 spaces away. They didn't walk in together, too smart for that. But I saw the look they exchanged across the parking lot. The subtle smile, the way her hand touched her hair. 16 years of marriage teaches you to read your spouse's body language, even when you wish you couldn't. My phone rang. "Pete, meet me at the office," he said. "I've got something you need to see." Pete's office occupied the second floor of a building that had seen better decades. The stairs creaked, the radiator clanged, and the coffee was strong enough to dissolve concrete. It felt honest in a way that glass towers and corporate speak never could. "Sit down," Pete said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "That bad? That obvious?" He slid a manila folder across the desk. David Kessler, age 45, married to Lisa Kessler for 18 years. She's a divorce attorney, by the way. Ironic, considering. I opened the folder. Photos, credit card statements, hotel receipts. A paper trail of deception that went back 6 months. "The Marriott downtown, every Thursday for the past 3 months," Pete continued. "Always the same suite, always charged to a corporate card. TechFlow's been paying for your wife's affair." The photos were grainy but clear enough. Natalie entering the hotel lobby, David following minutes later, them leaving separately, but with the unmistakable glow of people who'd been doing more than discussing quarterly reports. "And there's more," Pete said quietly. "This isn't his first rodeo. I found evidence of at least 2 other affairs in the past 5 years. Guy's got a pattern, targets employees, uses his position for leverage. Your wife's just the latest." I stared at the photos until they blurred. "And what about his wife?" "Lisa, clean as a whistle, as far as I can tell. Successful practice, good reputation. Word is she's been suspicious for years but never had proof. And now we've got enough proof to bury them both. Question is, what do you want to do with it?" I closed the folder and looked out the window at the city below. Somewhere out there, my wife was sitting in meetings, pretending to care about employee benefits, while planning her next rendezvous with her boss. Somewhere out there, David Kessler was making decisions that affected hundreds of people while using company resources to fund his extramarital activities. "I want them to pay," I said finally. "Not just for the affair. For the lies, the manipulation, for making me feel crazy when I knew something was wrong. I want them to lose everything." Pete nodded slowly. "Revenge is a dangerous game, Tom. You sure you want to play?" I thought about Zoe, about the life we'd built, about the foundation that had been crumbling while I'd been too trusting to notice the cracks. "I'm sure. But we do this smart, we do this legal, and we do this in a way that leaves them with nothing to rebuild." "All right then." Pete opened his desk drawer and pulled out a digital recorder. "Let's start planning." 3 weeks of planning led to this moment. Friday night at Romano's Steakhouse, the kind of place where power brokers made deals and marriages went to perish. I'd chosen the location carefully, public enough to prevent a scene, upscale enough that David would feel comfortable, and busy enough that plenty of people would witness what was about to unfold. I sat at the bar, nursing a whiskey and watching the entrance. Pete occupied a corner booth, pretending to read a newspaper while keeping his phone ready to record. At exactly 7:30, David's Tesla pulled up to the valet stand. Natalie stepped out first, wearing the black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. The irony tasted bitter. David emerged from the driver's side, his hand finding the small of her back as they walked toward the entrance. 16 years of marriage, and she'd never let me touch her like that in public. They were seated at their usual table. Yes, they had a usual table. The hostess knew them by name, which meant this wasn't just about hotel rooms and stolen moments. This was a full relationship, complete with dinner dates and shared wine preferences. I waited until they'd ordered their appetizers before making my move. "Excuse me," I said to their server, a young woman named Ashley whose name tag proclaimed her Employee of the Month. "I'd like to send a bottle of champagne to table 12. Dom Perignon, if you have it." "Of course, sir. Any message?" "Tell them it's from Tom Grant, with congratulations on their new partnership." Ashley smiled and headed toward the wine station. I returned to my position at the bar, watching as the champagne arrived at their table. Natalie's face went white when Ashley delivered the message. David's head snapped up, scanning the restaurant until his eyes found mine. I raised my whiskey in a mock toast. David said something to Natalie, probably trying to calm her down. She shook her head. her hands trembling as she reached for her purse. But before they could leave, the second phase of my plan kicked in. Lisa Kessler walked through the front door like an avenging angel in Armani, tall, blonde, and carrying herself with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a case. She surveyed the restaurant with predatory efficiency. Behind her walked James Morrison, David's divorce attorney, and Rebecca Chen, the lawyer I'd hired to represent my interests. The hostess approached Lisa, but she waved her off, having already spotted her target. She walked directly to table 12, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor like a countdown timer. "Hello, David," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the restaurant. "Natalie." Conversations at nearby tables stopped. Waiters slowed their pace, sensing drama. I slipped my phone from my pocket and started recording. "Lisa," David stammered, half rising from his chair. "What are you doing here?" Having dinner with my husband and his employee," she replied smoothly. "May I sit?" It wasn't really a question. Lisa pulled out a chair and settled herself at the table like she owned it. The lawyers flanked her, creating a semicircle of legal intimidation. "Mr. Kessler," James Morrison said, placing a manila envelope on the table. "Divorce papers. Mrs. Kessler is filing on grounds of adultery and misappropriation of corporate funds." "Corporate funds?" Natalie's voice cracked. "The hotel suite," Rebecca Chen explained, consulting her tablet. 6 months of charges to the company credit card for personal use. That's embezzlement under state law. The company's board will be very interested to learn how their executive expense accounts have been utilized. David's face had gone from pale to gray. "Lisa, we can discuss this privately." "No," she cut him off. "We're well past private discussions. Mr. Morrison has already filed the papers. You'll be served officially on Monday, but I wanted to give you the courtesy of a heads up." She turned to Natalie with a smile that could have frozen champagne. "Mrs. Grant, I believe your husband is also here tonight. How convenient." That was my cue. I left the bar and walked to their table, feeling every eye in the restaurant following my progress. When I reached them, I pulled out the empty chair next to Natalie and sat down. "Hello, sweetheart," I said. "How was your day at the office?" Natalie couldn't meet my eyes. "Tom, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" "Because it looks like my wife having dinner with her boss while his wife serves him divorce papers. What does it look like to you?" "We were just discussing a work project." "The Marriott project," I interrupted. "Suite 1247? You've been very dedicated to that particular project. 3 months of overtime every Thursday." David found his voice. "Tom, you're making a scene." "Am I?" I looked around the restaurant, noting the phones pointed in our direction. "I thought I was having dinner with friends. After all, we're all here together. One big happy family." Lisa leaned forward. "Mr. Grant, I believe you have some additional information that might interest the district attorney's office." I nodded and pulled out a USB drive, setting it on the table next to the champagne bottle. "Financial records, hotel receipts, text messages, everything's there. The company's forensic accountants will find it fascinating reading." "Those are private communications," David protested. "Actually," Rebecca Chen interjected, "any communications conducted on company devices or using company resources are subject to disclosure under corporate policy. You signed that agreement when you became an executive." The color drained from David's face as the implications sank in. Not only was his marriage over, but his career was about to follow. Corporate embezzlement, even small scale, was a career-ending offense in their industry. "Natalie," I said quietly, "I filed for divorce this morning. You'll be served Monday along with David. I'm asking for full custody of Zoe and half of all marital assets, including your stock options and retirement accounts." "You can't." "I can, and I am. 16 years of marriage gives me certain rights, even when one party decides to redefine the terms of the relationship without consulting the other." Lisa stood gracefully, smoothing her skirt. "Gentlemen, ladies, this has been illuminating. David, you have until Sunday to move out of the house. Mr. Grant, my office will be in touch regarding the corporate investigation." She paused, looking down at Natalie with something approaching pity. "Mrs. Grant, a word of advice from one woman to another. Choose your next partner more carefully. Character matters." The lawyers followed Lisa toward the exit, leaving David and Natalie sitting in the wreckage of their evening. Around us, the restaurant slowly returned to normal. though I noticed several people still holding up phones. This will be all over social media by morning, I said conversationally. Your colleagues, your friends, Zoe's classmates' parents. Everyone will know. Tom, please, Natalie whispered. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We could have gone to counseling 6 months ago, before you decided to redecorate the Marriott with your boss. We could have talked about whatever was missing in our marriage before you started charging wine and lingerie to his corporate card. I stood up, dropping a 20 on the table. Enjoy your champagne. It's the last expensive bottle you'll be drinking for a while. As I walked toward the exit, I heard David's voice behind me. Tom, wait. We need to talk about this like adults. I turned back, noting that his confidence had evaporated along with his career prospects. Adults don't use company money to fund affairs, David. Adults don't lie to their families for 6 months while planning their exit strategy. Adults take responsibility for their choices. What do you want? I want you to disappear. Transfer departments, find a new job, move to another city. I don't care. But if I see you anywhere near my daughter or my neighborhood, we'll have a different kind of conversation. David nodded quickly, understanding the threat. Lisa might handle the legal destruction, but I'd handle anything that fell outside the courts. I left them sitting at their table, surrounded by the debris of their relationship and the stares of 50 strangers. Outside, Pete was waiting by his car. How'd it go? He asked. Phase 1 complete. They're both served, both exposed, and both facing serious consequences. Lisa's handling the corporate investigation, and my lawyer's handling the divorce. And Phase 2, I looked back at the restaurant, where David and Natalie were probably trying to figure out how their perfect plan had collapsed so spectacularly. Phase 2 is making sure they understand that actions have consequences, and that some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. I was eating breakfast when my phone exploded with notifications, texts, missed calls, social media tags. The restaurant confrontation had indeed gone viral, shared and reshared across every platform where suburban drama found an audience. Dad? Zoe appeared in the kitchen doorway, her phone in her hand and confusion written across her face. Everyone at school is talking about you and Mom. Is it true? I set down my coffee cup and really looked at my daughter, 15 years old, caught between childhood and adulthood, about to learn that her parents were human beings capable of spectacular failures. It's true, I said. Your mother and I are getting divorced. Because she was cheating? The word hung in the air like smoke. Yes. Zoe sat down across from me, her phone forgotten. For how long? 6 months that we know of. And you knew? I suspected. I had it investigated. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. She was quiet for a long moment, processing information that no 15-year-old should have to handle. Where is she? I don't know. She didn't come home last night. That was true. After the restaurant disaster, Natalie had vanished. Her car wasn't in the driveway, her phone went straight to voicemail, and her usual haunts had no record of her. Part of me wondered if she'd gone to David's place. But according to Pete's sources, Lisa had changed the locks and hired security. My phone rang. Rebecca Chen, my lawyer. Tom, we have a problem. Natalie filed an emergency restraining order this morning. She's claiming you threatened her and David at the restaurant, that you've been stalking her, and that she fears for her safety. That's ridiculous. I know, but she has a witness. Your daughter provided a statement saying you've been acting erratically and that she's afraid of your temper. I looked at Zoe, who was studiously avoiding eye contact. Zoe, did you talk to your mother this morning? She called before school, Zoe mumbled. She said you might try to turn me against her, and that if anyone asked, I should tell them about the time you threw the plate. The plate. 6 months ago, I'd accidentally knocked a dinner plate off the counter while reaching for the salt. It had shattered on the kitchen floor, and I'd spent 10 minutes cleaning up the pieces while apologizing to everyone within earshot. Hardly domestic violence, but in the right context, with the right spin. Rebecca, how bad is this? You need to stay away from Natalie, David, and their workplaces until the hearing on Thursday. Any contact could be construed as violation of the order. And if I violate it, jail time, which would hurt your case in the divorce proceedings. After I hung up, I sat with Zoe in silence. Outside, the neighborhood was coming alive. Kids walking to school, parents heading to work, the normal rhythm of suburban life continuing while mine fell apart. She coached you, I said finally. Your mother told you what to say. Zoe's eyes filled with tears. She said you'd lost your job if this got out. She said David was trying to help us, and that you were ruining everything because you were jealous. Did you believe her? I don't know what to believe anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from Pete. Meet me at the office, now. I drove through town with the strange sensation of being a fugitive in my own city. The restraining order meant I couldn't go near TechFlow's building, couldn't drive past the Marriott, couldn't even shop at the grocery store where Natalie usually bought our food. My world had suddenly become smaller, defined by legal boundaries I couldn't cross. Pete was waiting with coffee and bad news. David's fighting back, he said, sliding a folder across his desk. Filed a harassment complaint with the police, claiming you vandalized his car and threatened him with violence. I never touched his car. I know, but someone did. Pete opened the folder to reveal photos of David's Tesla, its pristine silver paint job now decorated with what appeared to be acid burns, spelling out cheater across the hood. Professional job, Pete continued. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Paint stripper, applied with surgical precision. Damage is probably $15,000. Any cameras? TechFlow's parking garage has security cameras, but mysteriously they malfunctioned between midnight and 3 a.m. last night. Very convenient timing. I studied the photos. The damage was artistic in its precision, the letters perfectly formed and evenly spaced. This wasn't random vandalism. No, it wasn't. Someone wanted to send a message. Any idea who? Pete's smile was grim. I might have mentioned to Monica, Natalie's friend from girls' night, that David had been using company funds for his affairs. Apparently, Monica's husband works for TechFlow's IT department. Apparently, he takes corporate embezzlement very personally. Monica did this? Monica's husband did this. Monica just provided the motivation and the access card to the parking garage. I had to admire the poetic justice. David's own corporate policies had created the means for his punishment. Employee access cards, security camera maintenance schedules, and a workforce that didn't appreciate executives who stole from the company. There's more, Pete said. Lisa Kessler's investigation turned up some interesting information. David's been skimming from the corporate accounts for 2 years, not 6 months. We're talking about serious money, enough to buy that Tesla, pay for the hotel suite, and fund a lifestyle his salary couldn't support. How much? $250,000, maybe more. The forensic accountants are still digging, but it looks like he's been using fake vendor invoices and inflated expense reports to hide the theft. This changed everything. What had started as a simple adultery case was now corporate fraud on a significant scale. David wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a white-collar criminal who'd been using my wife to help cover his tracks. Where does that leave Natalie? Legally, she's probably in the clear unless they can prove she knew about the embezzlement. Practically, she's about to become the star witness in a federal investigation. My phone rang. Unknown number. Tom Grant? Yes, this is Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. We need to talk. An hour later, I sat in a conference room at the federal building, surrounded by agents who looked like they'd stepped out of a recruitment poster. Agent Martinez was younger than I'd expected, with sharp eyes and the kind of confidence that came from years of unraveling financial conspiracies. Mr. Grant, we understand you've been investigating your wife's relationship with David Kessler. That's correct. We'd like to see your evidence. I handed over copies of everything Pete had gathered. Hotel receipts, credit card statements, text messages, photographs. Agent Martinez reviewed the documents with the efficiency of someone who'd seen this pattern before. This is very helpful, she said finally. Mr. Kessler's activities have been on our radar for several months. Your evidence fills in some important gaps. What happens now? Now we build a case. Corporate fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. We're looking at serious federal charges. And my wife. That depends on what she knew and when she knew it. If she was just having an affair, that's not our concern. If she helped hide or launder the stolen money, Agent Martinez shrugged. That's a different conversation. I left the federal building with a strange sense of unreality. What had started as a cheating spouse investigation had somehow evolved into a federal case. David's world wasn't just crumbling. It was being systematically dismantled by agencies with badges and subpoena power. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at Riverside Park, 6 p.m. Come alone, Nen. Natalie wanted to meet, despite the restraining order, despite the lawyers and the FBI and the viral videos. She wanted to talk. Part of me wondered if this was a trap, another move in whatever game she was playing. But part of me needed to hear her explanation, needed to understand how 16 years of marriage had led to this moment. I texted back, "I'll be there." Riverside Park sat on the edge of town, a collection of walking trails and picnic tables that overlooked the river. At 6 p.m. on a Monday evening, it was mostly empty except for a few joggers and dog walkers. I found Natalie sitting on a bench near the water, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd seen her in years. "Thank you for coming," she said without looking up. "The restraining order says I'm supposed to stay away from you." "I know. I'm sorry about that. I was scared, and David said it was the only way to protect ourselves." Numb. I sat down on the opposite end of the bench, maintaining distance. "Protect yourselves from what?" "From you, from the investigation, from everything falling apart. Everything fell apart the moment you started sleeping with your boss, Natalie. The investigation just documented the wreckage." She finally looked at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. How was it supposed to happen? We were going to wait until Zoe graduated. David was going to leave Lisa, I was going to leave you, and we'd start fresh. No one was supposed to get hurt. No one was supposed to get hurt? I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. "You were planning to abandon your family, and you thought no one would get hurt? You don't understand. David and I, we have something special. We connect on a level that you and I never could. You connect on a level that cost the company $250,000? Her face went white. "What are you talking about?" "The FBI, Natalie. They're investigating David for embezzlement. All those hotel rooms, all those expensive dinners, all those gifts he's been giving you, he paid for them with stolen money." "That's not true." "It is true. The forensic accountants have the records. David's been stealing from TechFlow for 2 years, and you've been helping him spend it." Numb. She shook her head violently. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Maybe you didn't. But you're about to find out just how much trouble your soulmate is really in." We sat in silence, watching the river flow past. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, and I wondered if it was heading toward another family crisis, another moment when someone's world would shift on its axis. "What happens now?" Natalie asked quietly. "Now you decide whether you're going to keep lying for a man who used you to cover up his crimes, or whether you're going to tell the truth and try to salvage something from this mess." "And us?" "There is no us anymore, Natalie. There hasn't been for months. You made that choice when you decided David was worth more than our marriage." I stood up, looking down at the woman I'd loved for 16 years. "The FBI will want to interview you. Get a lawyer, a real lawyer, not one of David's friends. Tell the truth, cooperate with the investigation, and maybe you can avoid federal charges." "Tom, wait." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, we can work through this together. Some things can't be fixed, Natalie. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt." I walked away, leaving her sitting by the river with the ruins of her perfect plan. Behind me, I heard her crying, but the sound didn't move me the way it once would have. Some wounds heal, but some leave scars that change you forever. My phone buzzed as I reached my truck. "Pete, turn on Channel 7, he said. "You're going to want to see this." I found a sports bar on the way home and asked them to change the channel. The evening news was running a story about corporate fraud at TechFlow Solutions, complete with footage of FBI agents carrying boxes of evidence out of the building. David's photograph filled the screen as the anchor described the charges. David Kessler, a senior executive at TechFlow Solutions, was arrested this afternoon on federal charges of embezzlement and wire fraud. The FBI alleges that Kessler stole more than $300,000 from the company over a 2-year period, using fake invoices and inflated expense reports to hide the theft. The story continued with interviews from shocked employees and statements from company officials expressing their commitment to cooperation with the investigation. David's career wasn't just over. It was being publicly dissected on television for everyone to see. I drove home through familiar streets that somehow looked different now. The houses were the same, the streetlights cast the same shadows, but my perspective had fundamentally shifted. I was no longer the trusting husband who'd been blind to his wife's betrayal. I was something else now, someone who'd learned to fight back, someone who understood that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to watch others face the consequences of their choices. Zoe was waiting in the kitchen when I got home. "Dad, is it true about Mr. Kessler being arrested?" "It's true." "And Mom, your mother made some bad choices, but she's not a criminal. She's just someone who got involved with the wrong person. Zoe nodded slowly. She called me this afternoon. She was crying. What did she say? That she was sorry. That she never meant for any of this to happen. That she still loves us. Do you believe her? I believe she's sorry. I believe she didn't mean for it to happen this way. But I don't think she's sorry she did it. Just sorry she got caught. My 15-year-old daughter had just demonstrated more emotional intelligence than her mother had shown in 6 months of deception. I felt proud and heartbroken at the same time. What happens now? Zoe asked. Now we figure out how to move forward. Just you and me. Are you going to be okay, Dad? I looked at my daughter, smart, resilient, honest in ways her mother had forgotten how to be, and realized that maybe I was going to be more than okay. Yeah, I said. I think I am. The next morning brought a knock at my door that changed everything. I opened it to find Monica Stevens, Natalie's former best friend, holding a cardboard box and wearing an expression somewhere between guilt and determination. We need to talk, she said. Monica had been part of Natalie's inner circle for years. The girls' nights, the shopping trips,